As Cindy said, my name is Aaron Gisho. I've been studying for about 5 years. About 20 years ago, I was in gas and chemical systems as a semiconductor manufacturer. They closed down, moved over to do facilities maintenance. In between that, I got my real estate license and actually worked for Hometown over at the BCC office when it was still there. And so I was doing facilities maintenance for about 9 to 10 years, and that company closed down as well. So I decided to take all of the knowledge and everything I gained while doing all of the work and put it into something that I love a lot, which is to be able to make a direct impact on other people's lives in hopefully a positive way. So I decided to get into home inspections and have been doing it for about 5 years. So that's a little bit about me. I own the company. My wife is still owner of the company. She's 20 years active duty military, stationed at Fort Gregg Adams. And so that's kind of where we are with that. I was just going to go over a few things. Home inspectors use a minimum amount of basic tools to do an inspection. Inspections are not they're thorough, but they're not totally invasive. They're very much visual and what you can see and what you can access. Does anyone have any questions to start off with? Anything? Seven pillars is actually from the Morrison Bible, Proverbs 9:1. He lives in a water house. She has built 7 pillars, so that's where it comes from. There's also 7 pillars of wisdom, which also plays into as well. The idea is to get homeowner wisdom into their home so that they can decision to the best for themselves and their hands. With that, if y'all would like to over kind of like the process of home inspection, typically, let's say the home inspection was set for 1 p.m. Ideally, as home inspector, you'd like to get out to the house 15, 20 minutes early. Yes.
Would you show off and show these guys the Just Lipton script since you're a BCC powerhouse?
So,
We have to just let the script like that.
And it is good to have all that information within the show to go on it. So, basically, a home inspector ideally would be able to get to the house about 15 to 20 minutes before the inspection time. That allows them to most likely start with the roof first and or the exterior of the house. And it's a really good showing for the client when they show up and see that they're already in the building. From there, if you can just get on time is obviously the most important factor. So, start typically with the roof, then do the exterior of the home, go around it multiple times one direction, multiple times the other directions, go in the house. Kitchen is normally the first area. Start in there, dishwasher. Let's start the dishwasher, give it a chance to run through a cycle. That allows to pick up on any type of water leaks, things of that nature. And then moving in, can do the HVAC, which takes time to either heat up and or cool off. So again, based on the allotted amount of time that you have to do the inspection, just trying to do everything as efficiently as possible. And then the very first thing is just like when you're showing someone a house that you do, is you would go take them and walk all throughout the house, give them some, ability to become, a little bit familiar with it, then kind of set off. As a home inspector, the first thing I do is walk through the entire home, and that is so that I can find out where the bathrooms are. So let's say if I'm on the first floor and I see something that looks like moisture in the ceiling, I say to myself, what's above this room? And have an idea of where that's coming from. After that, as I mentioned, the kitchen, HVAC, are kind of next things in line, electrical, plumbing, and then just to go through all of the rooms and checking those walls, ceilings, all of the, the elements of the home. And that's just kind of a quick walkthrough of what that process looks like. Typically, fires inspections are the inspections that home inspectors deal with the most. I would say 11-month warranty would probably be the next popular inspection, and then listing inspections are or here and there. So those are basically the three types of inspections that I see typically.
Can you explain that 11-month warranty thing?
Sure. But,
Inspection.
so if you ask someone who's bought a new home, they typically comes with a 1 year builder's warranty. And then instead of waiting for the entire 12 months to go and then have the inspection done, which can then maybe, not fall time wise, or be like, oh, I get it till later. You have it done at 11 month, and that's the 11th month warranty title for that. And that inspection is much more different than an inspection on an existing home, because that 11th month warranty, you're going through and looking at nail pops, areas that you touched up with paint, nicks, and things like that. And that's much more smaller issue items than you would typically do on a already approved. So,
Yeah, and so that's more of a informational for the owner, and those type of things are considered cosmetic. So those are the type of things you wouldn't be looking for on a resale inspection.
sure. And of course, big things, if there are large stains on the carpet, obviously, it's still something you put in our reports to make note. Always want to make sure that the client realizes that you notice things that they noticed when they went through the house as well. But that covers, the typical inspections. As you mentioned, for informational purposes, early inspections have been pretty much the mainstay over the last few years. And, as agents, your brokers will obviously help you walk yourself, through that. But, even though it may be for informational purposes, taking out the ability to go back to a seller and ask for either money, or for them to make repairs, having the client still have a way to get out of the contract, if there's something significant enough is something. So check with the brokers on how they feel, about all of that.
Talk a little bit about the report and what that looks like.
Sure, absolutely. I've run some sample reports. We use Spectora software, and it kicks out a fairly long report, and it also kicks out a summary. At the end of every inspection, typically your agent will be there and the client will be there if possible. At the end of the inspection, I like to go over a brief summary of the items that I found. I find that if you vocalize and actually have a conversation with someone about what you find before they get the written report, it makes the written report much easier to kind of take in. And so summaries typically are anywhere from 5 to 10 pages. I've got a few of those and pass around for these. And then I also have a few examples of full reports, and this is just instead of doing a large amount of defects, I want you to get something that gives you the ability to get through and look at it and get a nice idea. So the summary is nice because it just gets straight to the point. It has pictures and it gives a write-up of what was found. And then the report is the part that I'm to get to the client if they don't have that pre-warning of what they're going to find can create more questions than maybe what was necessary. So I find that those little meetings at the end, they're great with the client, you're great with the agent.
Are your cost of career estimates local or like national for your software?
So they're based on the local. But as you all know, over the last couple of years, those amounts can vary depending on who you end up using.
So one thing you all need to remember, your job in helping your client through this is to take the information that you get. An inspector's job is to identify everything he sees. Now, not everything he sees is a problem. It could be just normal, routine, deferred maintenance that he's going to inform them about so they can either budget for a repair down the road or they can just, I guess you kind of educate the buyer if they're there on the maintenance things they
Sure.
should be doing. So a lot of this information. So your job is to be the voice of reason and keep things calm and work with an inspector who is going to not be an alarmist and is not going to give you a 50-page report and just say everything's a problem. Your job is to get familiar enough with the process that you know which items are things that, yeah, this is an issue that needs to be addressed one way or another. Typically those are water problems, maybe an electrical problem, crawl space, or roof leak, something like that. He may give you information on like the agent system. That's not a problem. It's still working. That's not a problem, right? What are some of the things that it seem to find on like a 20-year-old house? Like, give them an idea of what's normal on a 20-year-old.
Sure. So a 20-year-old house, the roof would be the first thing, and we're talking about going back to 2004, where shingles lifespans were 20 to 25 years. Those same asphalt shingles, if installed today, their lifespan is about 30 to 35 years. So roof would be the first one. On a report, you label, near end of life is as Cindy said, that is not a defect. As long as it is still a fully functioning, roof, you don't see any type of moisture intrusion, things of that nature. It's still fine. And to go back to something Cindy said about finding defects and issues in the house, the same way as an agent, buyers and sellers have, two main, items that they consider: time and money. It's really very much the same thing with defects found in a home. That's why it is important that a home inspector relays things in a manner of which almost anything in a home can be repaired. It's a matter of whether or not that person wants to spend money to repair it, and also time can be a factor, in that as well. So I just wanted to touch on that as well. So relaying information, communication is very important. And as Cindy said, you have some people that are on this particularly. It's not, take something and make something like it's a much larger deal, and it's insurmountable.
So it's not unusual for you to get a full report that you have to price out you have to price out every individual thing as if it was a separate item. So you could get a report that said there's $20,000 worth of work that needs to be done on the house. There may only be a couple items on that are really things that have to be taken care of or should be taken care of. So that's where you need to get experienced enough with the process to understand and coach your buyer on, this is all normal. This is just things he's pointing out to you that you may want to address sooner rather than later.
Sure, absolutely. Just to give you all an example of that, GFCI protection in the kitchen, for example, the same thing that correlates to a lot of homes is something being grandfathered in. So if you have a home that's been sitting there for 30, 40 years, and doesn't have GFCI protection in the kitchen, and the kitchen has not been renovated, and still does not have GFCI, that's something, GFCI is for the user's personal protection. So it's actually to save your life, and it has nothing to do with the actual piece of equipment. So I will always make a mark in there that even though the kitchen is up to code for when the house was built, that is still an item that the buyer may want to upgrade or, do at some point in time. And again, that's the difference between some inspectors will mention that, some will not. It's something that has to do with your personal protection, which is the main point of inspection, is safety related. So that's something I always mention to put in there.
Yeah. And I would say if you have an unusual property, like an older property, I would ask the inspector that your client reaches out to if they have experience. I had a client, it was an older house, and the inspector actually terrified the girl to death. She thought her house was going to light up under her and burn up. And he just wasn't experienced with old houses. And everything that was in there was maybe not today's standards, but it was functioning. The house was not in danger of burning up the way he presented it to her. So you have to be somewhat informed. You also, Aaron mentioned something earlier, the phrase, get out of the contract. You need to set the expectation with your client from the beginning that the home inspection is for information and for planning and for your knowledge and your protection. And yes, if something major is found, like a major crawl space problem, a major roof leak, you need to know that. But the purpose of the home inspection is not to get out of the contract, and you need to set that up front with your buyer. The goal is we're going to buy the house, so don't make an offer on the house if you're not sure you want to buy it, because then it comes the time of negotiating which things are going to be either repaired or a credit offer. So set that expectation up front. Yes, ultimately they are protected if there's something that cannot be worked out, but you cannot just count on it as my way out of the contract, or you shouldn't set that expectation.
And then, some other items, again, as we mentioned before, there's something near end of life, HVAC systems, all of this quite a bit, and stuff like that. It's a notation. It's just, again, it's information. It lets you know where the equipment is at that time. Also, that's another thing about home inspections. The inspection is only for that day and time. It does not constitute, that any of the equipment, anything will continue to, last from that day forward. That's just an important factor.
Yeah, something could work today and not tomorrow. We won't have that happen, right? So what are some things that you all would like some advice on when you're doing your showing? I would think if you could show them maybe how to determine the age of some things. I know I can never find a plate. I always tell my clients it's on there somewhere, and we try and find it. But any clues or hints like that you can give them of things they can be looking for or asking questions about during the show?
Sure, absolutely. So moisture intrusion is one of the number one things that we find in inspections. It's one of the most damaging causes of damage in a home. So when walking through a home, if you see areas that look like there could be potential moisture intrusion, that's something to take note of. One of the common things is just walking around. It's easy when you're stimulated by so much going on around you, but just in walking on the floors. And again, if you're talking about much older homes, you're going to have a little bit more unevenness. So if you're walking in a fairly new home and you can kind of feel high areas, low areas. If you're walking around, there's going to be certain amounts of settlement that you'll see where walls and ceilings come together, corners, above windows, above doorways, and stuff like that. But if you see excessive amounts, if it's something like on a second floor, you can have what's called truss upheave, and that can be something that's cured by ventilation and stuff like that. So it's just good to, as you're walking through, try to just take notes of some general things that that you see. Obviously, experience will give you a lot more detailed ways of approaching that. But moisture, obviously, there are things that holes in the walls like that you'll be able to take note of easily. If you're in a house and it's an 85-degree day and it feels kind of warm in there, and you go over and look at the thermostat, you can kind of verify for yourself what it's set at versus what it is. That will give you an idea as to whether or not the heating system or cooling system may be working properly. That's something that we check in the home inspection as well. That's kind of some very basic, looking for broken windows and cracks, stuff like that. Really, yes.
I'd like you to explain the different kinds of mold and which kind is going to kill somebody and which kind is common. Because I think mold gets drawn up. Anytime they mention mold, people freak out over that. Sure. I think all the houses have mold.
Sure.
Yes. I think that would be helpful.
So absolutely, just about everything has mold. And there are variances, so I do not do mold inspections. But in doing inspections, I do look for, and again, in home inspections, I never use the term, mold. It's, microbiological. I guess it's easier to harder than it is to say. And evaluate, and I put in for further evaluation by a professional. But as you said, there are different types. Most molds that you're going to come across are not black mold, are not extremely dangerous. They're very common and easily treatable. And so that's something to keep in mind as well, that again, it's about being able to treat and or repair items, and just about everything in a house is able to be treated or repaired.
And wouldn't you say like most homes in our area have some sort of fungus or something?
Absolutely, yes.
So that's one of those things where you're there to set the expectation. Yes, if he comes out and says it's really wet, you've got to have somebody else look at it, but don't let it freak your client out. And just need, we'll clean up, new vapor barrier put down, something like that.
And there's also signs that it has previously been treated, all that gets indicated in the reports.
Alright, any other questions?
How about cracks in walls and ceilings? How do you tell what is normal and what is potentially a very costly problem?
Sure, so a lot of that will depend on the age of the house, as well as the actual structure of the cracks. So typically, you'll get, there's weak points. So right above windows and doorways, you have lintels above windows and doorways, and that creates a weak area, so you'll kind of get that diagonal crack that you see very often. Depending, again, on the age of the home, that can be a very common thing. Older homes, you're obviously going to see some more areas of cracking, but if you see excessive cracking, meaning a lot of cracking, that's unusual. If you're in a house that's 3 years old and there's just cracking everywhere, that could be a sign that there's an issue going on. But and again, like I said, it also depends on what floor you're on as well. If you're on the first floor, you could have a moisture issue that's being caused by bathrooms above that is causing expansion and contraction of joists, and that will show itself in cracking. And if you're on the second floor, as I mentioned before, you can have ventilation issues in your attic or just issues with insulation in general, and that too can cause issues as well. So the reason for further evaluation is that further evaluation will tell them whether it's structural, whether it's settlement, or whether it's some other issue, concerning that. But
Okay.
if that answers your question.
A little bit. Thanks.
Yes.
I get asked the question a lot, is this a structural wall?
Sure.
And I know it depends on underneath the house, which way the beams are going, which way they cross, and that kind of, is there any tips that you
Yeah,
can
so-
give on
So, and you'll see this on the first floor and the second floor as well, because they all go into whether they're load bearing or not.
that? Right.
And so load bearing walls, you'll see, if you're able to see looking at the ceiling, and it can be difficult for even, very, very trained people, but to be able to see what way the joists are running. And so if the joists are running across this way, they're sitting on top of, girders running this way. And so those girdered walls are your load-bearing walls. And like I said, there's variances though that even that won't necessarily hold up to be true. But it can be very difficult depending on what the ceiling allows you to see. Yes.
Quick one. I've been looking at a few basements recently, check homes with basements.
Okay.
Is there anything, like if we were to look for 2 or 3 things in basements to make sure they're in good shape while we're showing a house?
Sure.
Anything you recommend looking for?
Sure. Cracking, any type of movement. So horizontal cracks are the worst ones. Those typically mean that you're getting pressure from one side or the other that's actually displacing the wall. You'll see, you can have vertical cracks, you can have angled cracks and stuff like that. If it's in the mortar, so the mortar is the weakest part, and so that's where cracks are made to go in. If anything is larger than a quarter, even if it's, vertical or, I'm not trying to take out, if it's not horizontal, it's fine.
Yeah.
But if anything's larger than a quarter, there's a potential for there to be a structural issue with that. Whether or not, like I said, it's
A quarter in width, you mean like edge will crack itself? Okay.
Yes. So cracks in the wall, moisture is a really big one, based on the drainage that you have. So if you have a house that doesn't have any gutters on it, you're getting a lot of moisture down by the foundation. And if it isn't properly sloped, so the slope for that is supposed to be 6 inches over 10 feet. If you don't have proper slope away from your home, a lot of that moisture is just going down and sitting, down on the ground. So moisture, cracks in the wall, and then obviously anything that you see, and it depends. It can be a finished basement, unfinished basement, so that's going to allow you to see different things. If it's an unfinished basement, you'll be able to see much more of the framing and construction and stuff like that. So those are things that you can pay attention to as well. But that's something. Yes.
Are you guys typically doing inspections on like the outside like patios and areas? I had one recently where like a person bought a house and like they had retaining walls kind of put in the driveway and the inspector didn't like protect the retaining wall at all, and it turned out like later on the retaining wall had like a bunch of like needed to be updated and stuff and was like losing stuff. Is that typical for you guys? Or?
Sure. So we have a standards of practice, and the standards of practice is supposed to lay out a floor, a ground of the minimum we're allowed to not inspect, right? Or inspect depending on how you want to look at that. And you can exceed the standards of practice, which is done all the time. So patios, stoops, driveways, all of those things are things that almost every inspector inspects. So if that isn't in your report, I would consider that to be, underside. That's in the SOP. But retaining walls is something that is not part of InterNACHI's SOP. So unless there was something that was, visual or would have caught the inspector's attention, that's something it would be up to them whether or not they included it or did not include it. A good inspector would include that, especially if you're talking about a retaining wall that's, in close proximity to the house. It's different if you have retaining walls that are, holding up land that's quite a distance from your house. But even that, you should take a look at that as well.